Hello everyone. Back again with film recaps. In this video, I'm going to recap one of the thriller mystery films from 2019, titled In the Shadow of the Moon. Before we get to the storyline, I'd like to wish everyone a happy and great day. Without further ado, let's get straight to the storyline. The movie opens with a shot of Philadelphia in 2024, where we see an empty office building and a devastated city, filled with fire and the piercing screams. The scene then moves backwards in time to 1988, where we catch a glimpse of the lives of three different people: a concert pianist, a bus driver, and a chef in a diner. They are all busy with their usual routines when, all of a sudden, blood gushes from every opening in their faces. All three collapse dead within seconds, and at the same time, we see a mysterious figure in a blue hoodie wandering through the city. Not far away, a police officer named Thomas wakes up, and prepares a meal while his pregnant wife is sleeping. On the news, he hears how a bus driver lost control of a vehicle and slammed into several oncoming cars, unleashing chaos. Thomas then gives his wife the food, and tells her goodbye, before rushing out for his graveyard shift. Sometime later, Thomas meets up with his partner, Maddox, and they arrive at the scene where the bus driver collapsed and caused the accident. The lead detective is an officer named Holt, who turns out to be Thomas's brother-in-law. Thomas checks the deceased bus driver and is horrified to see blood gushing from her face. Her brain is essentially melted, with the cause of death identified as hemorrhaging. He also notices 3 marks on the neck, which he thinks are puncture wounds. Holt dismisses it as a birthmark, but soon they are notified that 2 others died in the same way just moments earlier, and both bore 3 similar marks on the back of their necks. Next, the officers go to examine the bodies of the pianist and the chef, who also appear to have died from hemorrhaging. Thomas offers his insights on the case, but Holt tells him to stay out of it, because he thinks this case could be a potential big break for his promotion. Sometime later, Thomas and Maddox arrive at the hospital, where they meet the doctor who performed the autopsy and ask if he found anything crucial. The doctor reveals that the marks on the neck are actually deep injections, driven so far that they likely reached the vertebrae. The substance injected is identified as an unstable isotope, but the bizarre thing is that the forensics team cannot determine its exact composition. Later, Thomas and Maddox go to grab some food, when they receive a call that a woman nearby has been attacked on her neck with a blunt force. It turns out she also has 3 marks on her neck, but she is still alive and not bleeding. The 2 officers seize the opportunity, and quickly arrive at a nightclub, where they meet the stripper who was attacked. Thomas questions her, and she explains that she was hit on the neck with a metal tool by a black woman wearing a blue hoodie. She also reveals that the woman's left hand was injured, and covered in dried blood. Just then, Holt arrives to interrupt their conversation, and asks the girl to describe in detail what happened. She reluctantly repeats everything when, all of a sudden,
She poked my neck with something.
Yes? Oh, Jesus. Hey, I need some help here. Whoa.
After the girl collapses dead, the police go out and arrest several black women, who match the description given by the last victim. However, we see that the real killer is still free and she is placing a strange device on a car. She runs away and disappears as soon as a cop arrives. Not long after, Thomas and Maddox are driving, when they come face to face with the same woman, but she quickly flees, sparking an intense chase. The 2 detectives call for backup, and Holt orders every officer in town to search for her. Meanwhile, Thomas' car nearly collides with a truck, so he and Maddox are forced to continue their pursuit on foot. They realize the woman is somewhere near the subway, so they plan to corner her, and split up. While looking for the woman, Thomas stumbles across a strange device, and keeps it. Later, in the underground subway, Maddox finds the woman, and demands that she surrender, but she manages to overpower him, and breaks his leg before fleeing. Thomas, who hears the commotion, rushes to the scene and begins chasing the killer woman. He eventually corners her and orders her to put her hands up and turn around. Then, in a shocking twist, she calls Thomas by name, and congratulates him on his daughter. She also says sorry about his partner, but the confused officer doesn't understand what she's talking about. Thomas then tries to arrest her, but the woman easily overpowers him and handcuffs him to a bench, while saying that she'll see him again. But as she turns to leave, Thomas attacks her with the same strange device she used to inject her victims, causing her to lose her balance, and she tragically falls in front of an oncoming train and dies. This incident leaves Thomas horrified, but before he can collect himself, he receives news that his wife is in the hospital. He rushes there, and is approached by an investigator, who reveals they couldn't trace any ID or fingerprints for the suspect woman. They found a key with her, but they have no clue what it's for. Even more bizarre is that a bullet was found lodged in her wrist, and it matches Thomas's revolver, although he never fired a shot. However, a nurse suddenly interrupts their conversation, and informs Thomas that his wife is suffering severe complications, and hemorrhaging. He thus rushes to her side, and tries to comfort her through the excruciating labor pains. But she soon begins to lose consciousness, and the doctors rush frantically to save her. Sometime later, a nurse hands a healthy baby into Thomas's arms, but the joy is instantly shattered when he learns his wife couldn't make it. The scene then cuts to 1997, where we see Thomas's daughter, Amy, who is now 9 years old. She is making breakfast, while the TV reports that protesters are in the streets, demanding answers about the incident from 9 years ago. Many sympathize with the unidentified black woman, and argue that she was unarmed, but instead of taking her in, the white officer threw her under the train. Later, Thomas, who is now a detective, wishes his daughter a happy birthday, and gives her a bracelet as a gift. The two then visit Thomas's wife's grave, where he notices a snail on the tombstone, and fresh flowers, leaving him puzzled. Soon, he receives a call from the police, and is shocked to learn that the killings, identical to those from 9 years ago, are happening again. Without wasting any time, Thomas rushes to the crime scene, and meets Maddox, who now walks with a limp because of the incident from 9 years ago. Thomas asks him if he placed flowers on his wife's grave that morning, but Maddox denies it. The two then arrive at a university classroom, where a professor lies dead, bearing the same 3 puncture marks on his neck, and blood streaming from his face. Moments later, Holt, who is now a lieutenant, arrives, and the officers check the security camera footage. Their eyes widen in shock as they see the perpetrator, who looks and is dressed exactly like the woman from 9 years ago. But since she is supposed to be dead, they assume it must be a deranged copycat killer. Upon returning to the station, Thomas begins reviewing the case files from 9 years ago, hoping they might lead to a clue. He soon comes across the mysterious key that was found with the woman back then, and assigns his team to investigate it. Meanwhile, more deaths continue to occur, pushing the police to the edge and sparking panic among the public. Later, Thomas examines the new suspect's left hand in the footage, and notices it's injured, just like the woman from 9 years ago. He tells Maddox that they never made that detail public, so it's impossible that a copycat would know about it. Just then, an officer approaches, and informs them that the key they investigated belongs to a plane that was only manufactured a year ago, in 1996. The detectives are bewildered, and upon learning that there is only one airfield within 100 miles with this model, they decide to head there. As Thomas and Maddox are leaving, they are approached by a physicist named Dr. Naveen Rao, who explains that this case is closely linked to his research. He says the appearance of the killer coincides with a natural phenomenon known as the supermoon, or blood moon, which occurs precisely every 9 years. At this particular moment, due to gravitational forces and electromagnetic fields, a kind of bridge is created, which connects with another place. But the detectives dismiss his theory as nonsense, and leave without giving it much attention. Sometime later, the detectives arrive at the airfield, where Thomas heads inside alone and meets the manager. Thomas shows him the picture of the woman, asking if he has ever seen her, but the man says he hasn't. However, he looks kinda nervous, and we surprisingly see the woman is also nearby and hiding behind a wall. Thomas senses his nervousness, so he communicates with him by writing on a piece of paper, and learns that someone else is here. But as the officer reaches for his gun, the woman suddenly holds him at gunpoint, and says it's nice to see him again. Next, the woman makes the manager tie up Thomas to a chair, but during this, the detective sneakily makes a call to his friend outside, who hears everything. The woman then asks the manager for the keys to his plane, and he reluctantly hands them over. He then reaches for a hidden gun, but the woman quickly overpowers him, just as police sirens sound in the distance. The woman panics, and decides to take Thomas hostage, right when Maddox enters the room, so the woman quickly reacts and shoots him in the head, but immediately regrets it upon realizing who it is. Thomas is distraught to see this, but the woman takes him hostage, and puts him on the plane while the cops are approaching. Lieutenant Holt notices that his brother-in-law is inside the plane, so he orders the cops not to open fire. Later, the woman tells Thomas to stop chasing her, and claims she is doing all of this for a good reason. She explains that every 9 years, when the moon sets, she can come back, but only for a short time. But he refuses to stop chasing her, so she unties him and throws him off the plane, causing Thomas to plunge into the sea below. Later, he eventually reaches the shore, where he notices wreckage from the plane crash, but the woman is nowhere to be seen. The next morning, Holt and his team arrive and begin searching desperately for the killer. Thomas tells them not to bother, since the woman is from the future, but Holt just watches him as if he's crazy. The movie now jumps 9 years ahead, to 2006, where an older Thomas is seen digging the grave of someone named Harold Novak. He uncovers the skeleton, and soon notices a puncture wound in the vertebrae of his neck. Up next, Thomas heads to his car, where he resumes his investigation, and based on a newspaper clip, we learn that Dr. Naveen has been missing for a long time. The next morning, Thomas goes to meet Harold's widow, and introduces himself as a private investigator who wants to ask about her husband. She is surprised, as her husband has been dead for 18 years, but lets him in anyway. Later, she gives him some of Harold's old files, revealing that he was the leader of a racial supremacy movement called the Real American Movement. She explains that Harold spread his ideas by secretly embedding hate messages in American history books, and sending them to a vast network of contacts. It turns out that Harold and his ex-wife, Heather Russell, had been involved in this together, until they split up. The woman then provides Thomas with a mailing list of her husband's contacts in exchange for some compensation. Later, Thomas studies the files, and learns about other victims of the killer woman, and shockingly, they all seem to be connected to Harold and political extremism. He then goes to pick up Amy from school, as it's her 18th birthday today. It turns out Thomas is no longer a cop because of his obsession with the case, and since he has been neglecting his daughter as well, she now lives with Holt's family. Afterward, Thomas meets with Holt, and reveals information about a victim from another jurisdiction. His name is Harold Novak, who was claimed to have died from a drug overdose. Thomas shows Harold's mailing list, and it turns out several victims of the serial killer were connected to the Real American Movement. Thomas confides that the mysterious woman travels backward in time, and that she didn't come back to life in 1997, she simply wasn't dead yet. He is certain she will return today, and asks for Holt's help in tracking down Harold's ex-wife. But Holt dismisses his theory as nonsense, and asks him to focus on trying to rebuild his life for the sake of his daughter. However, while Holt is leaving, Thomas tearfully approaches him and begins apologizing for his actions. He says he wants to seek help, so Holt comforts him, and says he will help in any way he can. The two hug before Holt walks away, but we soon learn that Thomas was only pretending to be sad to steal his badge. Later, Thomas calls the station pretending to be Holt, and manages to get the address of Heather Russell. He soon arrives to meet her, and is shocked to see a dead woman with her face bleeding like the other victims. And then suddenly, Thomas manages to injure her left hand. But she quickly speeds away on a motorcycle, so Thomas hijacks a passing truck, and begins pursuing her. After an intense chase, Thomas follows her into a sewer line, and notices her inside a time-traveling machine. It begins filling with water, and he swears they'll see each other again before the woman disappears along with the device. Afterward, as Thomas is emerging from the sewer, he is immediately arrested by the police and a furious Holt. Thomas explains how he shot the woman, which explains the injuries, and the bullet in her left hand. But Holt refuses to believe him, and at the same time, Dr. Naveen is seen watching everything from a distance. The scene then cuts to another 9 years later, in 2015, when Dr. Naveen Rao is working on an isotope device. He tests the device on pigs, causing the animals to bleed from the nose, eyes, and ears before dying instantly. He is excited by his invention, but his assistant shows him footage of Thomas camping on the beach where the killer disappeared 9 years ago, patiently awaiting her return. Meanwhile, Thomas gets a voicemail from his daughter, who reveals that her baby is due soon, and she wants him to be there. He reflects on it. But then all of a sudden, later, Thomas finds himself in the back of a truck, and it turns out Naveen is the one who kidnapped him. Naveen reveals that he supports the killer woman's cause, and he's working on an invention she will use one day. He explains that he doesn't want Thomas to kill her and ruin everything, so he has to hold him for 3 days. Thomas argues that the woman is killing innocent people, but Naveen justifies it, claiming it is to prevent something far worse, and that she is a savior. While the scientist is babbling, Thomas manages to free himself and attacks him, which causes Naveen to lose control of the vehicle. They end up crashing, and while Naveen is trapped under the vehicle, Thomas seizes the opportunity to run away, and heads to the beach. Elsewhere, the mysterious woman once again arrives with her time machine. She soon emerges from the sewer and approaches the beach, but to her shock, Thomas is already waiting and holds her at gunpoint. However, the woman, whose name is Rhea, drops a bombshell, revealing that she knows Thomas won't kill her, because he was the one who told her to take this job. She shows him a bracelet given to her by her mother, and Thomas is shocked when he realizes it is the same one he once gifted to Amy. Here, he is stunned to realize she is his granddaughter, whom he killed in 1988. Thomas asks her to go back and stop it, but Rhea claims it is already done, and time traveling to the past is a one-way trip. She says that her mission starts at this beach on this day, and always ends with her dying. Before leaving, Rhea asks him to go home and take care of Amy, while Thomas collapses to the ground in tears. The scene then cuts to a glimpse of a future, where we see an institute called Rao Technology, where an old, wheelchair-bound Naveen hands the isotope device to Rhea. In a shocking twist, we learn that the attack shown at the beginning of the movie was caused by the same radical group that Harold Novak founded and led through his revolution. The resulting civil war left millions dead, and transformed people into bloodthirsty insurgents hungry for revenge. Rhea's mission is to travel back through time in reverse chronological order to kill the exact right people, to stop a bomb that would go off in 2024 and ignite a civil war in America. Once Rhea succeeds in her mission, we see the same sequence that opened the movie, the destroyed Philadelphia now shown in reverse. This signals that the future has been set right, and that the Civil War has been averted. The scene then shifts to 2015, when Thomas arrives at the hospital with flowers, just as Amy gives birth to Rhea. The movie concludes with Thomas finally finding peace, and holding his granddaughter, who is destined to shape the future. Okay guys, thanks for watching. See you again in the next video.